The drone that found what should have stayed hidden. I've always loved flying drones. For me, it was more than just a hobby. It was a way to escape the mundane, to soar above the ordinary and see the world from an entirely new perspective. Over the years, I'd upgraded from cheap beginner models to high-performance rigs equipped with state-of-the-art cameras and long-range transmitters. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened during my last flight. It started as an ordinary Saturday. I'd been scouting new locations to fly and came across a remote forest on the edge of town. The place was perfect. Wide open spaces, tall trees, and no signs of people. I parked my car at the trailhead, loaded my gear into a backpack, and hiked a mile or so into the woods. The air was cool and still, and the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird. I found a clearing and set up my drone. This was one of my best models, a sleek, custom-built quadcopter with a high-definition camera and an extended flight range. I powered it on, ran through my pre-flight checks, and launched it into the sky. The drone buzzed upward, slicing through the air as I guided it above the treetops. The live feed on my controller screen showed an expansive view of the forest, a sea of green stretching as far as the eye could see. It was breathtaking. After a few minutes of casual flying, I decided to push the drone further, sending it deeper into the forest. The signal remained strong, and the camera feed was crystal clear. I began to notice something odd, though. The deeper I went, the quieter the forest seemed. The birdsong faded, and even the wind seemed to die down. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. That's when I saw it. A clearing in the heart of the forest, different from the one I was standing in. The trees around it were twisted and blackened, their gnarled branches reaching skyward like skeletal hands. In the center of the clearing was an old crumbling structure, half hidden by vines and moss. It looked like a chapel, though its roof had collapsed long ago, and the stone walls were riddled with cracks. My heart raced with excitement. This was the kind of discovery every drone pilot dreamed of, a hidden relic, untouched and forgotten by time. I maneuvered the drone lower, circling the chapel for a better view. The camera picked up intricate carvings on the stone walls, strange symbols I didn't recognize. They weren't religious, at least not from any religion I knew. They were angular and sharp, almost runic, and the longer I looked at them, the more unsettled I felt. I decided to fly closer. As the drone approached the chapel, the live feed began to glitch. Static crackled across the screen, and the image flickered. This was strange. My signal was strong, and I'd never had issues like this before. I adjusted the controls, trying to steady the feed, but the interference only grew worse. Then the sound came. At first, I thought it was feedback from the drone's microphone, a low, droning hum that rose and fell in rhythmic waves. But as it grew louder, I realized it wasn't mechanical. It was a voice. No, not one voice. Many voices, overlapping and discordant, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The sound was coming from the chapel. My hands trembled on the controls. I tried to pull the drone back, but the controls felt sluggish, unresponsive. The drone hovered in place, its camera fixed on the chapel. The voices grew louder, more insistent, and I thought I could hear words buried in the noise. Words like "come" and "stay." And then I saw it. From the shadows of the ruined chapel, something moved. At first it was just a flicker, a distortion in the video feed. But as it stepped into the light, I froze. It was a figure, humanoid but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were a marionette controlled by invisible strings. Its face, or what passed for a face, was blank and featureless, a smooth expanse of pale, glistening skin. The figure tilted its head, as if it were looking directly at the drone, and then, impossibly, it reached out. Its arm extended far beyond what should have been possible, a grotesque limb stretching toward the camera. The live feed cut to black. My heart was pounding as I frantically tried to reconnect the drone. The controller beeped in protest, displaying a signal error. I scanned the sky, hoping to spot it returning, but it was gone. I told myself it was a technical failure. The drone must have crashed, and the figure was just a trick of the light or a glitch in the feed. But deep down, I knew better. Against my better judgment, I decided to retrieve it. I couldn't leave such an expensive piece of equipment behind. I marked the drone's last known location on the GPS and set off into the forest. The hike was grueling. The trees seemed to close in around me, their twisted branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sun. The deeper I went, the colder the air became, and the stillness of the forest was oppressive. It felt like I was being watched. When I finally reached the clearing, I hesitated. The chapel looked even more sinister up close. Its walls loomed like jagged teeth, and the air around it was heavy, almost suffocating. I didn't want to go any closer, but the GPS showed the drone was just beyond the entrance. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The interior was dark and cold, the floor littered with debris. My flashlight beam danced across the walls, illuminating the strange carvings I'd seen on the video feed. Up close, they were even more intricate, almost alive, their sharp lines seeming to shift and writhe under the light. And then I saw it, the drone, lying in the center of the chapel. Its rotors were broken, its camera shattered. But it wasn't alone. The figure was there, crouched over the drone. Its back was to me, but as I entered, it straightened and turned its head slowly, unnaturally. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the chapel was plunged into darkness. When the light returned, the figure was gone, but the whispering had started again. Louder now, filling the air with words I couldn't understand. The carvings on the walls seemed to pulse, glowing faintly with a sickly green light. I didn't think. I ran. I sprinted through the forest, branches tearing at my clothes, the whispers following me. When I reached my car, I didn't stop. I drove until the forest was far behind me, until the whispers faded and the world felt normal again. I haven't flown a drone since that day, but sometimes late at night I hear it. The hum of the rotors, the static of the feed, and the voices calling me back to the chapel.